Number 10. Blockbuster. Blockbuster might not be an A-list Bat villain, but I don't think I've ever mentioned him on this channel before, and I thought it was about time that we gave him a little shout out. We see you, Blockbuster, we see you. While not one of the most popular Bat villains, Blockbuster still packs a mighty punch. The current incarnation of the villain is Roland Desmond, who has reappeared in the Prime Earth continuity throughout the current Nightwing series. In fact, even though he started out as Detective Comics, he's now actually thought of more as a Nightwing villain. Even more recently resurfacing in Nightwing in issue 83. Blockbuster has also had many incarnations throughout the years since the character's first appearance as Mark Desmond back in 1965 in Detective Comics issue 345. Some versions have been tougher and more powerful than others, but all of them have possessed some level of super strength, durability, and stamina, usually granted to them by the Blockbuster serum, and often at the cost of some intelligence. However, the current Blockbuster does not suffer the same weakness, instead simply suffering physical pain if remaining in his transformed super buff state for too long.
And a 9, Condiment King. Okay, before you yell at me, hear me out a little bit, okay? Condiment King may just seem like a random dude who uses ketchup and mustard as a weapon, but you have to admit that would not fit in the DCEU. The DCEU has a much darker tone than the Batman animated series Condiment King was created for, and if he was in the DCEU, they would have to make him incredibly deadly for it to work properly. This guy would basically just use allergies as a weapon, and I don't mean like the "oh, you got the sniffles and your eyes are kind of itching" kind of allergies. I mean like throat closes up and eyes pop out of your head kind of allergies. They would have to turn Condiment King into such a horrific killer that he would actually end up being overpowered and probably cause a lot of controversy. Even if it was just like condiments combined with acid instead of normal condiments, that would be absolutely nuts. You thought that they handled Doomsday bad? Wait until you see people's faces melting because they got hit with Dijon honey mustard and frickin' acid.
Number 8. Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze is Victor Freeze, a vastly underrated Batman villain in my opinion, but admittedly a hard villain to bring to the big screen, though maybe not as hard to bring to the big screen as Condiment King. And that's not just because of his overall look and character design, but because of how capable he can be and how powerful he is. Mr. Freeze is one of the few Batman villains who actually possesses powers and isn't just a deranged criminal. Of course, he is still a deranged criminal. Mr. Freeze in current continuity is also a deranged scientist, who from an early age seemed to have a fixation with the cold and cryogenics. This fixation likely existed because of key tragic moments that had happened when he was younger, also taking place in and around the cold, such as his father abandoning him and his mother's fatal injury and later death at his own hands. Freeze would become so obsessed he would convince himself that he was married to the subject of the first case of cryogenic stasis, despite the fact that she was technically like a lot older than him, Nora Fields. But a change to the timeline would make it so that this was actually true and that he and Nora had in fact been together before she was frozen, so she became his real wife, meaning their relationship was no longer considered one of Victor's delusions in main continuity. Mr. Freeze is not only powerful with his ice gun and unique physiology, which allows him to freeze anything he touches and create ice structures, but he is complex and unique in appearance, meaning we likely won't see him in the DCEU anytime soon. Not that I'm saying the villains aren't complex. That wasn't like a sick burn to the DCEU or anything, just to be clear.
And at 7, Scarecrow. The Scarecrow has made an appearance in the Dark Knight movies, however those aren't in the DCEU, at least yet. Until this point, the closest we've gotten is the Fear Gas from the Arrowverse crossover event of Elseworlds. However, that gas made some insane hallucinations that ended up with the Flash, who at the time was Oliver Queen's, speed to be useless, which would be incredibly overpowered when it comes to the rest of the DCEU. When Oliver and Barry were fighting, Barry was landing hits on Oliver despite not having his super speed, and Oliver wasn't knocking Barry away with super speed punches. This being used on a greater scale, like we would see Scarecrow do in an actual movie, would absolutely destroy the world, especially with heroes like Superman and Martian Manhunter. And we know that this is how the Scarecrow's gas would operate in the DCEU, because thanks to the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover, we got confirmation that Ezra Miller's Flash and Grant Gustin's Flash exist in the same multiverse. Or perhaps the cinematic universe exists within the antimatter universe. It would explain the darker themes. Either way, we know that's how the gas would work, and that would be a little too much to handle in one movie.
Number 6. Bane. Bane is known for being one of Batman's all-around strongest villains, but let's not forget that Bane also brings smarts to the table. Okay, so maybe not if we're counting the Harley Quinn animated series version of Bane, but comic book Bane at least is known for also possessing a brilliant mind. A lot of people forget that about him. He was the mastermind in fact behind the death of Alfred, which was also part of his scheme to break the Batman in a much more all-around way. Granted, he also took out Alfred because his demands were not being met. He'd basically ordered Batman not to make a rescue attempt, but then Damian Wayne did make a rescue attempt because he didn't listen to the warning that was given to them, and so Alfred died by Bane's hands after Damian's attempt failed. Bane, being such a massive man of muscle, also makes it hard to bring him to life. He's not only a hard villain to write, but he's also a difficult one to cast and depict as well, because he just looks like literally a brick house.
Halfway through in at number 5, Arkham Knight. Not only is this character loved by some of the people who played the Batman Arkham series of games, the Arkham Knight is a highly skilled military technician who possesses expert knowledge of Batman's tactics and fighting style, which can be attributed to the fact that he was personally trained by the Vigilante, being revealed as Jason Todd, a moment that we all remember, for better or worse. He is a master of hand-to-hand combat, martial arts, and marksmanship. The high-tech military-like battle suit that he wears further enhances his physical strength, speed, and durability. When Batman was ambushed by the Dark Knight, he was able to knock the Dark Knight off his feet with one punch. This absolute mastery of Batman's tactics would make him a hella good villain, however the amount of power he has would probably be too much for the DCEU. They already had Batman fight Superman and win, so they would have to supercharge Arkham Knight to make it an actually interesting fight, which would just ruin the character even more than some would consider him already ruined.
Number 4. Ra's al Ghul, or Ra's al Ghul, depending on what you prefer. A lot of people prefer Ra's, I prefer Ra's. We can all coexist, it's a beautiful world. Ra's is one of Batman's all-time greatest nemeses. While he might not possess direct superpowers of any kind, like most of Batman's rogues, he is one of the most skilled fighters and has one of the most brilliant minds. Like Bane. I like people with brilliant minds apparently. Too bad Ra's usually uses his brilliant mind to concoct all sorts of schemes in order to topple governments, sow chaos, and gain power the world over. Ra's al Ghul is the head of the League of Assassins and has come close to completely defeating Batman in the past, with him even successfully using Batman's own research during the Tower of Babel JLA story to defeat all of Batman's superpowered colleagues on the team.
Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Solomon Grundy. Solomon Grundy, born on a Monday. That's what the story says. But when killed, Grundy will return and be resurrected in the swamp where he died, and then because that's his thing. This sort of resurrection and recurring antagonist thing doesn't really work in movies. In TV, sure it can work. Introduce the character, then have them come back once a season for an episode or two. However, with movies, those are more often than not one-time villains that are to be dealt with and then forgotten about, unless the movie is a two-parter or the villain ends up winning. This kind of concept has to be taken into account when thinking about who would be too overpowered in the DCEU. Solomon Grundy would be one of those villains that wouldn't realistically be a one-time villain. Even if they brought him back for another movie with a big team up of villains, it wouldn't matter, because he would die and then just come back again. The story would never be over. The threat would never actually be fully handled, and that's just the way the character was written. It's great for comics and it would work okay on TV, but in movies this guy wouldn't work in the slightest. It's unfortunate because I love Grundy as a character, but they would just ruin him like they did Arkham Knight and Doomsday. May I go on?
Number 2. Poison Ivy. Poison Ivy is one of my favorite characters in the Batman universe, period. And also coincidentally one of the most powerful villains I think that currently exists in Batman's wheelhouse. She is brewing up something huge lately in the Batman comics and has threatened basically the entire world on multiple occasions, but also has sought in the past to remind people of why she strikes out as an eco-terrorist, at times working with international science communities and political meets to fight against global warming and work towards preserving important parts of our ecosystem. However, while Poison Ivy will be coming to the Arrowverse on CW, we still have yet to have a casting for her in the DCEU, and this could be because Pamela Isley is just too crazy complicated and OP to show up there. After all, she has proven before how hard she is to take on in the comics. When she took over the world, it seemed almost nothing initially, not even Batman, would be able to stop her.
Finally, in at number 1, the Batman Who Laughs. Being first introduced in Dark Days, the casting #1 in 2017, the Batman Who Laughs was Bruce Wayne from Earth 22 of the Dark Multiverse. He was a lieutenant of Barbados, and the leader of the Dark Knights during the first Dark Multiverse invasion, and later the infected heroes of the Secret Six. He convinced Perpetua, the original creator of the multiverse, to choose him as her lieutenant over Lex Luthor, as his vision was limited by his ego. Then the Batman Who Laughs continued on with his own plans, eventually acquiring cosmic power and becoming a bigger threat than Perpetua herself. Yeah, that's right, this guy ends up gaining cosmic power. He ends up implanting his brain into the corpse of a version of Bruce Wayne who had Dr. Manhattan's abilities, giving the Batman Who Laughs near omnipotence. Yeah, this guy is the definition of overpowered. And not only that, but he's an absolute psychopath. He will gut you like a fish while your family watches and then make them play double dutch with your intestines and think that that was a boring weekend. This guy is absolutely insane. I know I said that the DCEU is dark, but this is even darker than they would go. There, in my opinion, is no way that they could introduce the Batman Who Laughs properly without making the movie rated R or literally just being unable to publish it. It's absolutely insane. So yeah, I don't think we'll be seeing him anytime soon. Starting us off in at number 10, BOOTFACE. Okay, this guy's origin is the reason I wanted to talk about him. BOOTFACE's origin was getting kicked in the face by Batman. That's it. I'm not even kidding. BOOTFACE was a thug working for Terminus. He got his name because of the boot print embedded in his face, which, like I said, is from Batman. BOOTFACE first appeared in Batman and Robin Volume 2 number 10 from 2012, and honestly, it's one of the most interesting origins I've seen. And I mean this completely seriously. Everyone else has like relatives die or was living in poverty. This dude just got kicked in the face and got so mad that he became a supervillain. Like, even if he wasn't really a good person beforehand, I mean, like, he was a thug and basically still is, but this time he has a ridiculous name. And a man who is fueled by pure rage because he was permanently scarred by his attacker that ends up being a superhero, yeah, that's good enough for me. Plus, I hadn't heard of this guy, so maybe you didn't either. And at 9, Professor Pig. Professor Pig originally debuted in the alternate reality story of Batman number 666, which I love. However, was introduced as a recurring character in 2009 in Batman and Robin number 1. In Batman Reborn, Laszlo Valentine was an extreme circus mob boss until something turned him into Professor Pig, leading him to begin funding his scientific experiments by selling, illicit substances to the criminal underworld. All in all, he's an extremely disturbing villain and makes me think about why people aren't afraid of pigs as they are afraid of clowns, because if you ask me, this guy is freaking horrifying. Professor Pig, if you couldn't tell, actually ends up wearing a pig mask along with a butcher's apron, and what at times appears to be some form of hastily thrown together surgical outfit. This is just freaking weird, and he ends up brainwashing and controlling various people, and he ends up calling them Dollatrons. Straight up, I don't know what else to do with him other than just run away, so I'm going to move on now. Although next time I have a pet pig in Minecraft, I know what I'm naming him. And at 8, Joker's daughter. Unfortunately, it's not Joker's biological daughter. That would be a very interesting story. But this is just the girl who finds Joker's face, stitches it onto hers, and then goes berserk. So honestly, it could very well be his biological spawn. The only person that I think could commit such an atrocious act like this is the Joker, so who knows. While maybe not being as prolific and accomplished as the Joker, Joker's daughter is definitely insane enough to make this list, even if I'm pretty sure many people know about her. But hey, even if one person didn't and they watched this video, then boom, it's enough for me and it counts. But not to mention the fact that she also went by Catgirl, Scarecrow, Riddler's daughter, Penguin's daughter, Card Queen, and Harley Quinn. Each incarnation also calling herself the respected super person's daughter, which I have to say is going to make the family reunion very awkward. But in actuality, she ended up being Duella Dent, Two-Face's daughter. Apparently, which seems like BS, but we all love a girl with a little flair, you know? And at 7, Birthday Boy. Ray Salinger was a serial killer who operated in Gotham. Under the alias Birthday Boy, he was actually the first costume criminal encountered by Batman during his crime-fighting career. Introduced in Batman Earth 1 Volume 1 in 2012, Birthday Boy is fascinated by young girls resembling his first kill, a 15-year-old named Amanda Grant. When in his killer mode, he wears a burlap sack with holes cut out for his eyes and a birthday party hat, usually in a room decorated like a young girl's room at a birthday party. Great. As a calling card, he left birthday candles where he stole away his victim and told his victims to make a wish to a cake decorated with the words "Happy Birthday, Amanda," which is only creepier since we have our own Amanda here, and I feel like this guy is a representation of all her DMs. I think the sickest part of this character though was that when Batman first started, Birthday Boy had been hired by Mayor Oswald Cobblepot to eliminate his various enemies, and in return, he was given girls from the street or enemies of the Penguin as a reward. God, This is something that you'd see on like Criminal Minds. And at 6, the King of Cats. It first introduced in, I don't think this was ironically, Batman number 69, nice, from 1952. Carl Kyle is the brother of Selina Kyle, who was inspired by his sister's infamy to become a costume criminal. His cat-like garb and his crimes revolved around the theme of cats, and he resembles a male version of Catwoman. In March of 1952, Gotham City was struck by a series of feline-related crimes, perpetrated not by the now reformed Selina Kyle, but by a costume criminal known as the King of Cats. Carl sends flowers to Selina, causing Batman to investigate her involvement, like the jealous boyfriend he is. He soon becomes convinced that she is innocent, but asks that her, the expert on feline-themed crimes, didn't know that was a thing, to aid him and Robin in arresting the King of Cats. Selina, however, refuses because it's her brother, but she doesn't tell Batman that. He gets captured easily by Batman and has his handed to him multiple times. I guess you're a punching bag when you're not a female that Batman wants to sleep with. Sorry, Carl. Halfway through into number 5, Mirror Man. Lloyd Ventress is a criminal who was detained at Gotham State Penitentiary. Using broken mirror shards, he distracts the guards long enough to escape from prison. Then, inspired by mirrors, somehow he becomes Mirror Man. Upon creating a machine that would enable him to look through objects, Mirror Man began targeting Batman so he could figure out his secret identity. He literally discovers Batman's secret identity by using an X-ray mirror, which is freaking nuts. Mirror Man gets sent to prison before he can reveal the identity, however, but because they want conflict, he manages to escape, with a plan to reveal Bruce's identity to the world, only foiled when Alfred, dressed as Batman, interrupts a press conference Bruce Wayne was holding, instantly disproving the fact that Batman is Bruce Wayne because he saw them both in the same room. However, the public should have also seen this coming, so maybe the people of Gotham City are dumber than we thought. Well, I mean, they had Condiment King, so I guess they are pretty dumb. And at 4, Calculator. While the Calculator now seems to be an oracle of sorts for supervillains, the original purpose and MO of the Calculator is far more entertaining and interesting for me. Noah Cutler began his criminal career by crossing the country and getting into fights with various superheroes intentionally, analyzing and recording their battle tactics to ensure that he couldn't be beaten again. Or in some incarnations, he would simply get beaten and then press a button on his chest to ensure that he didn't get beat again. Maybe that was taking down the information or something, I don't know. But either way, do you know how insanely overpowered that could have been? Just being able to press a button on your chest and then boom, you're instantly basically immune to Batman or Robin or even Superman. That would be amazing. You do this enough times and you can just do whatever you want. Then other villains start paying you to do their crimes for them because you guarantee success. That's freaking nuts. I wish they kept that Calculator because he could have been a bigger villain than Darkseid if he kept going like that. Damn, that would have been awesome. Getting close to the end in number 3, Killer Moth. Having decided that the lawbreakers of Gotham City needed a costume protector just as the honest citizens needed Batman, Killer Moth emulated the Dark Knight in every way, copying his paraphernalia and building on his legend to create his own supervillain identity, like Batman's version of Reverse Flash. He even had his own moth signal that supervillains could use when they were in trouble. Drewy Walker, introduced in Batman number 63 in 1951, is actually the first supervillain Barbara Gordon ever defeated as Batgirl, which I mean probably doesn't support the whole most powerful thing, but think about it. If Mothman was worried more about his twisted sense of justice than money, as he was motivated by, he would have been an insane villain. Wanting to protect the criminal underworld just for the sake of it rather than to get paid, while maybe slightly more unrealistic, would make him insane. He also ended up basically making a devil's bargain to become more powerful, but that resulted in him becoming a hideous creature that truly resembled the name Killer Moth. So, that could have been something. But ultimately, in number 2, the Eraser. The Eraser was the chosen alias of Lenny Fiasco, who turned to crime after living his college days under constant mocking and taunting by his classmates. Fiasco is a professional at covering up the tracks of other crimes. For a 20% cut, the Eraser will erase the evidence of another crime. And honestly, I think that this is the only job that anyone with the last name Fiasco could have. Sorry. This villain's power is a special helmet designed to look like a pencil eraser that can wipe off evidence, even those that would be invisible to the naked eye, which is actually pretty damn cool when you think about it. After Batman posed as a villain to try to capture the Eraser, the villain told Bruce, who he had realized was Bruce, that he had actually become a criminal because Bruce shattered his dreams of going out with Celia Smith. Bruce didn't even remember her name, which made Eraser even angrier, but Yeah, I think that this is the absolute coolest concept for a supervillain though, because in all honesty, if this guy just wasn't an idiot, he would have ruled the world. Straight up, this guy would ruin every single investigation. He could turn the tide of trials. This guy would end up being a shadow government. If only he wasn't a dumbass. Finally, in at number 1, Lex Joker. Lex Joker was created when John Dee, also known as Dr. Destiny, collapsed the DC universe in half. First appearing in Batman/Superman number 60 in 2009, Lex Joker is a combination of, you guessed it, Clayface and Bane. No, just kidding, it's Joker and Lex Luthor. Lex Joker hired Doomstroke and Terranado to destroy the Justice Titans. However, after the JTs allied with Batman and Superman, he hired 4 more mercenaries to create the Brotherhood of Injustice. Thanks to Terra, who had gone undercover within the JTs, they were able to attack the Justice Tower, and come on, let's be honest. If you have the brains of Lex Luthor and the complete insanity of the Joker, that's one hell of an opponent. When you have 2 powerful forces in comics, at some point they're just bound to be put together in some way to create a larger, even more powerful villain. And Lex Joker is probably the scariest combination that we could have gotten that wasn't like Joker and Doomsday or Joker and Darkseid.
Coming in at number 10 as a bit of an honorable mention is the Batman Who Laughs. Now, the reason this villain is only getting an honorable mention is because he's relatively new and has had a huge amount of publicity in the few years since his creation. But I still do think this character deserves some more exploration further down the road. As a twisted combination of Bruce Wayne and the Joker from the dark multiverse, the Batman Who Laughs was an incredibly intimidating villain that only got even more powerful when he gained the powers of Dr. Manhattan and became the Darkest Knight. But seeing as how he was then killed by God Mode Wonder Woman, and I do think that the Batman Who Laughs deserves a comeback in the near future so that we can see what really happens when the true Batman and the Batman Who Laughs go head to head. Coming in at number 9, we have Owlman, the evil opposite of Batman from Earth 3. Born under the name of Thomas Wayne Jr., as a young boy, Owlman murdered his younger brother Bruce and had his butler Alfred kill his parents to ensure that the Wayne fortune was not wasted by their frivolous spending. Using his costumed identity as Owlman to intimidate the leaders of Gotham into falling under his control, Owlman was a twisted version of everything that Batman stood for, and every time their universes have crossed over has led to some incredibly dramatic battles. And with the DC Omniverse recently having become a lot more open than it was during the New 52 era, it's only a matter of time before Owlman and Batman are trying to outwit one another once more. Coming in at number 8, we have the malicious psychologist known as Hugo Strange. One of Batman's oldest villains, originally debuting only 9 issues after the Caped Crusader himself in Detective Comics, Professor Hugo Strange was also one of the very first villains to ever figure out his secret identity as Bruce Wayne. While initially depicted as a typical mad scientist stereotype, using a weather machine to hide his minions' robberies with a thick layer of fog, more recent interpretations of the character have seen him as a devious manipulator, using his position of power as a doctor of psychology to examine the criminals of Arkham Asylum and scheming to gain power in Gotham City. It's this emphasis on mental ability rather than actual superpowers that makes Hugo Strange such an interesting villain to deal with, and why he definitely deserves to come back in a major Batman storyline. Coming in at number 7, we have the intelligent zombie, Solomon Grundy. Inspired by a 19th century English nursery rhyme, Solomon Grundy was born centuries ago as a wealthy merchant, but after being murdered and having his body dumped in a swamp with mystical properties, he's now cursed to constantly be resurrected with slightly different properties each time. Usually being depicted as an incredibly physically strong zombie, Grundy is also incredibly resilient to both magic and physical damage, meaning that every time he's faced by either Batman or Superman, they need to figure out a clever new way to defeat him. Solomon Grundy has always been a dependable muscle for other villains throughout the years, but it would be nice to see him take more of a starring role in an upcoming Batman story. Coming in at number 6, we have CATMAN. Yep, that's not a typo, there's an actual incredible Batman villain named CATMAN, and we'd love to see more of him in the comics as he continues to walk the fine line between villain and anti-hero. Born under the name Thomas Blake, CATMAN was initially a famous lion trapper that decided a life of crime was a better use of his peak human abilities, and even based his initial costume on that of the already established villain Catwoman. However, after years of being thwarted by Batman and becoming mocked by other supervillains, Catman reformed himself after some time in the jungle into becoming an anti-hero, and was most recently seen working alongside the Suicide Squad. With all of this character development making him more than just a joke character, Catman definitely deserves to face off against Batman once more. Coming in at number 5, we have Mr. Bloom, the plant-based villain. With the ability to plant seeds within people that would grant them incredible superpowers but at the cost of their lifespan, Mr. Bloom threw Gotham into chaos during a period where Bruce Wayne was unable to be Batman and Commissioner James Gordon had instead taken up the cape and cowl. The coolest thing about Mr. Bloom wasn't just the unique look of his powers and his visual design, but how they were able to manipulate the people and villains of Gotham into a new status quo so easily. Seeing this villain have a rematch with Bruce Wayne, or even get to interact more with the similarly plant-based Poison Ivy, seems like an obvious choice for a comeback, and I can't wait to see what this villain does next. Coming in at number 4, we have Prometheus. While not an alternate reality version of Bruce Wayne like several other villains on this list, Prometheus is still a dark reflection of the Batman, given that he had to watch his criminal parents be gunned down Bonnie and Clyde style by Gotham City police forces. Waging war against law enforcement and justice of any kind, Prometheus is made all the deadlier with his helmet that allows him to download fighting skills directly into his brain. It's this deadly combo of physical prowess and ideological differences that make Prometheus one of the more interesting Bat villains, and someone who definitely needs to be featured more often. Coming in at number 3, we have the iconic Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face. Originally fighting for the side of justice with Bruce Wayne as Gotham's district attorney, Harvey Dent's mind was split in two following an acid attack that scarred exactly one half of his face. Making all of his decisions through a coin flip based on his past childhood trauma, Two-Face is one of the most well-known villains of Batman, but hasn't gotten a chance in recent years to really headline an event as a villain, usually only taking the focus in smaller storylines or as a supporting character. Personally, I think Two-Face is long overdue to take his place as a master of the criminal underworld. Coming in at number 2, we have Bruce Wayne's former childhood friend and current adulthood enemy, Hush. Born under the name of Thomas Elliot, Hush as a child was one of the first people to inspire Bruce on his road to becoming Batman. However, Thomas Elliot was a deranged child, wishing to have his family's fortune for himself and killing both of his parents to have it. After traveling the world and training to become a warrior, Hush adopted his supervillain persona and allied himself with the Riddler to rid the world of Bruce Wayne, organizing many of his enemies and even allies against him. And while the villain has appeared several times since, it's been a while since we've truly gotten to see the master manipulator Hush at work. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the Phantasm, aka Andrea Beaumont. Originally debuting in the animated film Batman: Mask of the Phantasm, Andrea Beaumont was Bruce Wayne's first love, the girl he almost considered abandoning his mission as Batman for before the mission had even begun. Unfortunately for Bruce, Andrea and his relationship was forced to an end by the death of her father, causing Andrea to begin her descent into becoming the vengeful spirit known as the Phantasm. As a villain with an incredibly cool design and a very personal connection to Batman, the Phantasm has been only recently seen in the comics, and definitely takes my top pick for the villain that most deserves another storyline.
Number 10, Harley Quinn. While Harley Quinn's character design and costume has been changed, it's pretty similar to a lot of looks we've seen her in the past. Mostly what we're seeing in her new series is a change to art style, and with her new role as Batman Batman's ally and sidekick, a complete shift over to the side of being a hero. Harley is of course still bringing her unique approach to heroism, so don't panic if you are a fan of Harley's wackiness and standout personality. But considering where she came from, being Joker's sidekick, this is a pretty big change to her character as we originally knew her. If you've been out of the comics for some time and aren't quite as well versed in Harley Quinn's history, you might not recognize her in 2021 as she's gone from full villain to full hero. Number 9. Poison Ivy. Over the last few years, Ivy has gotten a few pretty drastic redesigns, so if you are reading her in 2021 from anywhere along her recent history in the past 3 to 5 years, you might be a little confused when it comes to her look and ask yourself, wait a minute, is that Ivy? Also, who's Queen Ivy? We've seen her go from eco-villain to hero and environmental activist and spokesperson to dead to alive, and split down the middle between those two warring personas, the villain and the hero, when we literally got 2 Ivies. Then from there she became Queen Ivy and got a complete redesign when it came to her costume. Now she's back to wreaking havoc on Gotham, or is she? Time will tell what alignment we'll see for Ivy in the future. But either way, I'm here for the ride. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want to learn about more cool redesigns and updates to characters that we've seen recently, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Especially in the Batverse, I feel like there's so many Bat characters that have been introduced and redesigned, it's awesome. Number 7. Black Mask. Black Mask not only has a new look and redesign, in future state that is, that I must admit is spectacular, but he also got a power upgrade during the Year of the Villain event. Black Mask was given the ability to change his identity with the added upgrade of an identity changing mask, which is pretty powerful. Also, his suits have gotten admittedly a lot more stylish over the past few years. So for those who remember his classic look, Roman Sionis may have the same mask, but the rest of his look also seems to have received an upgrade. Number 6. The Freezes. That's right, not only does Freeze get a new redesign, but he also gets a huge change in the fact that he was joined by his family, becoming a little supervillain fam jam unit all their own. 2 separate units really. In the main continuity, Mr. Freeze was given a serum by Luthor that allowed him to make his long-lasting wish come true. He was able to revive, cure, and become reunited with his frozen love Nora, who also ended up joining him in a life of crime. Yay! However, while it all started out sweet, their reunion would quickly turn sour when Nora became resentful of Victor for making so many choices for her, and in her eyes, trying to control her. Victor blamed the serum for her change of heart, but I mean, who really knows? I feel like Nora's kinda got a bit of a point, even though I feel really bad for Victor in this scenario. In Batman issue 96, we are treated to an alternate Victor Freeze who commits crimes alongside his sons as a little criminal family unit. Super cute. Number 5. Man-Bat. While so many supervillains are getting power upgrades, additional allies, and more horrifying redesigns, Man-Bat is going the other way with it. Man-Bat is Kirk Langstrom, who ends up joining the Justice League Dark and gets a much more adorable character redesign as a result. He looks a lot less monstrous and a lot more humanoid and cute. Kinda geeky. It's great. He even wears a bow tie. Ah! This is likely a redesign meant to symbolize Man-Bat having tackled some of his personal demons and his move more towards a heroic role as opposed to a completely tortured soul and uncontrollable monster. Number 5. Scarecrow. Scarecrow already looked pretty terrifying in the comics, but now he looks intimidating as well. Very intimidating. Not just maniacal and crazed. We got a fresh look at the Scarecrow redesign in previews for Infinite Frontier, and then in all his glory in the actual comic itself in issue 0. Here, Scarecrow appears to wear a gas mask with straw or sticks coming out of his head, almost like a crown. He is armed with long fingernails or claws at the end of his gloves, evoking a sort of Freddy from Nightmare on Elm Street feel, especially as these claws seem to be directly connected to vials of fear toxin, which have tubes connecting to Scarecrow's headpiece? That's what it looks like to me. I think the idea is possibly that Crane is producing the fear toxin himself from his own mind and sending it down to these vials to be dispersed whenever he manages to scratch an enemy with one of his needle-pointed claws. All in all, it's a pretty intense look that might leave you asking who this character is, but kind of in a good way, as I consider this redesign to be an upgrade to the villain. Number 4. Catwoman. Catwoman in Batman Earth 1 has come in with a wild new look that will leave you floored. I mean, you will admittedly still recognize her, just not as the Catwoman that you're used to seeing. This version of Catwoman, instead of wearing her typical black or dark purple catsuit, looks a lot more noticeable and bold by comparison in terms of her design, especially for a thief. Here we see Catwoman donning a purple crop top and hot pants with striped thigh-high socks. She still sports a purple color motif at least though, so that helps with the recognition. Also, she has a paw print belt buckle and a cat mask, a literal cat mask, and she's got a cat on her shirt. Still, this look and redesign for the character is definitely very different. Very unique, I would say. Number 3. Bane. Really, Bane's daughter goes by the alias of Vengeance, but she definitely looks and seems to be following in her supposed father's footsteps. Bane's daughter was first introduced in the new Joker series in issue number 2, and is revealed to be the daughter of the supervillain who went through a series of experiments to give her super strength like her dad. Her mission is to get revenge for his death, and she's doing so by hunting down the Joker, who she and many others believe was responsible for the events and many deaths of A-Day. Her father, who was in Arkham Asylum at the time, was one of the victims of that attack and died. So Bane Jr., aka Vengeance, is out for blood. Number 2. CLAYFACE. You really won't recognize CLAYFACE in the new Batman Earth 1 volume. CLAYFACE is not very recognizable here in terms of the story, as he is disguised for most of his appearance and in terms of his character design. Near the end of the story, we learn that Adrian Arkham, Bruce's grandfather, who returned from the dead, was in actuality CLAYFACE in disguise. We're all used to seeing more of a giant mud monster when it comes to how CLAYFACE is depicted, but instead, here we get a very kind of, I don't know, smooth looking baldy figure in the end, who appears to really kind of just be a man. Like a man who can shapeshift, but just a guy. Like a guy who, if you saw him on the streets, you wouldn't run in terror from him or anything. You might just notice his skin was like a little odd looking in terms of its texture, but that's about it. Other than that, he looks pretty average. Number 1. Two-Face. The Earth 1 version of Two-Face sees the character completely reinvented in a way you might not have expected, which is what makes it so great. On Earth 1, Harvey and his sister Jessica are working together to clean up Gotham alongside their good friend Bruce Wayne. After Harvey ends up dead, however, Jessica and Bruce are forced to continue their mission to eradicate corruption and crime in Gotham without Harvey, working on in his honor. But Harvey lives on in more than just their intentions. It turns out that Jessica develops a dissociative personality disorder, in essence becoming her brother due to the trauma of his loss. At least that's what it seems like if we had to explain it on paper. Although never explicitly called Two-Face, the duality of this version exists in the goodness of Jessica and the contrasting ruthless aggression of Harvey. Honestly, the story is so good, you really need to check out the new Batman Earth 1 Volume 3, because even knowing where this story goes, even though I just told you that part, it's still an amazingly compelling read, so go read it, even though you kinda know spoilers now.